Hi, this is Kirby Sommers, and I welcome you to the Epstein Project podcast. Today, I'd like to be discussing information that I've wanted to put up on YouTube, but I have been a little too busy to do so. It's about Bill Gates. It's information that I began to put up on YouTube in December. In fact, I will include a link in the description box on this video about a woman named Melanie Walker, who was a find of Jeffrey Epstein's, who is connected to Bill Gates, who is alleged to have had a thing with Prince Andrew. And I spoke about this in December. I tweeted about it several times last year. And because Bill Gates was not necessarily in the news, no one really paid attention, but everyone is paying attention now. You're going to want to listen to that podcast. Before I begin, I do want to thank my sponsor, medspa.clinic. Please support sponsors who support people like myself who work every single day on exposing the evildoers in the case that we now know as the Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and I'm going to add Leslie Wexner, Leon Black, criminal syndicate. Please support the people who support us, because mainstream media is not going to give you these stories. You're only going to get these stories from someone like myself, from Shaun Attwood's channel, where he has several people come on all the time to shed light on Prince Andrew, on Bill Clinton, on Donald Trump, on Ghislaine Maxwell, and he had some people talking about Bill Gates. In fact, I think it was Ryan Dawson who went on and talked about Bill Gates. So anyway, about Bill Gates. As you know, well, I've got my notes here, so I'm just gonna read my notes for a little bit and bring you up to date on that. So Bill Gates' father is Bill Gates Sr., and his mother is Mary Gates, Mary Jacob Maxwell Gates. So before I get to Mary, who has a very interesting past, I'd like to discuss Bill Gates Sr., who also has a very interesting past. Um, Bill Gates Sr., and again, I have tweeted about this, but not many people have been paying attention. Again, you're going to pay attention now. So, if you remember, at the end of 2017, Ronan Farrow wrote an article about Harvey Weinstein. It was published in the New Yorker magazine. It was called something about spying. I don't have the name in front of me, but it was about a company named Black Cube, who they're the people who they hire, they're all former Mossad agents. And so when you read the story, Army of Spies by Ronan Farrow, please read it. That's a very important story. It's still on the New Yorker website. So when he was helping Rose McGowan and the other women step forward against Harvey Weinstein, someone pretended to become a friend of Rose McGowan. Fast forward, and when Ronan Farrow got involved, he felt like somebody was following him. He had to move. There was a lot of interference in his life. He ended up losing his job, but he pressed on with the story. And it's really great that he did because while the Me Too movement had already begun, the fact that he was able to expose the underhanded work done by Harvey Weinstein and expose a company like Black Cube. Black Cube was introduced to Harvey Weinstein by Ehud Barak. Now, many of you are familiar with the name Ehud Barak. Ehud Barak was a friend of Jeffrey Epstein's. He has been photographed hiding his face, showing up with a bodyguard at Jeffrey Epstein's house. Ehud Barak was also given by Jeffrey Epstein an apartment on the 10th floor at 301 East 66th Street, an apartment building also that came through Leslie Wexner's properties, was transferred to Jeffrey Epstein and somehow ended up with his brother Mark Epstein. And 301 East 66th Street is the place where there were a lot of the, let's call them models and masseuses. Well, let's just call them what they were. The trafficked women stayed at the property. The property also had pinhole cameras, but Ehud Barak would come to New York. He would stay on the 10th floor. There have been articles written about the fact that the people that lived in the building, those who were not necessarily in Jeffrey Epstein's life, maybe a couple of the apartments were owned and or rented by normal people, they would complain about the fact that Ehud Barak's bodyguards and the men that he traveled with, because he apparently traveled with a team of men, they would sit in the lobby of that apartment building, and it would be a disruption for everybody in the building because they would just take over. So Ehud Barak introduced to Harvey Weinstein the company Black Cube. Black Cube was then hired to spy on Rose McGowan. So somebody pretended to be interested in her book, became her friend, started to get information from her, and it was a spy. It was like a spy from Black Cube. And then also they were harassing Ronan Farrow. He was scared for his life. Well, Bill Gates Sr. was the attorney and the advisor for Black Cube. And I know that I've had this information for about 3 years because once I read Ronan's article, I reached out to him and I sent him more information. Um, but in any event, no mainstream media has discussed the fact that Bill Gates Sr. owned a law firm called K&L Gates. It was a general practice law firm, and they were the advisors and attorneys for Black Cube. The other attorney that helped become the, let's say, the advisor for Black Cube is a man by the name of Michael Drury, Drury. So it was Michael Jury who had a company known as GCHQ, which is an intelligence and security company who works for the United Kingdom. Hello. So now we have the United Kingdom, we have Israel, we have the United States, the three main countries that are in the Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Leslie Wexner, Leon Black criminal syndicate. And so we have this guy, Michael, and Bill Gates Sr. working for Black Cube. Why no one has discussed this in mainstream media? Well, you know what? We know why, right? Because no one is going to really talk about the fact that Bill Gates' parents are a little, perhaps, not entirely on the up and up as far as, come on, how do you become an advisor to a company, an Israeli company, whose sole purpose is to spy on people, normal citizens, to disrupt their lives, to discredit them? That is not an honorable occupation. Um, Bill Gates, as everyone knows, is currently getting a divorce. His wife, Melinda, became very upset when Bill Gates continued his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Gee, I wonder why. And she's been upset since he went to dinner. Gates went to dinner at Epstein's house. It was reported, and since 2011, he stayed a little bit late because at the dinner there were these two lovely ladies. One of them was Eva Anderson Dubin. Eva Anderson, if you remember, was Jeffrey Epstein's so-called girlfriend for about a decade before Ghislaine Maxwell entered his life. Well, Selena Anderson at that dinner at Jeffrey Epstein's house had her daughter with her, her daughter Selena Dubin, who at the time was 16 years old. Gates had such a lovely time at the dinner that he stayed late. Okay, well, I'm going to be sort of jumping around here because I want to talk about Bill Gates' mother. Bill Gates' mother, as you know, was instrumental in getting Gates his breaks. She worked with IBM. She had an inside with IBM. But Mary Gates was the daughter of James Willard Maxwell Jr. He was named after his father, who was the director of the Seattle branch of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. Now, what you have to know about the Federal Reserve is that it's not an official branch of the government. It's sort of run by people like the Rothschild family. They have the bankers like Jamie Dimon. They have all the bankers in there. And there are only 24 directors at any given time for the branches of the Federal Reserve, which, some of they're spread out in like these segments of 24 areas. What's interesting about the number 24 and about how the Federal Reserve selects a director for each one of those 24 areas is that that's how the underworld, the criminal underworld, also operates. The criminal underworld selects within the United States, there are 24 areas, and it echoes where they sort of have these headquarters, sort of like initially we had the five major crime families, but underneath those five families, you have sub families, and it's all divided in 24 factions. So that 24 number is interesting because it's what the Federal Reserve Bank does, and it's what the criminal underworld does. Mary Maxwell um, was part of, she was the president. I mean, she did a lot of things that women at the time were not doing. So Mary Maxwell Gates was the president of the King County's United Way. So the United Way, as you may have heard of it, is a nonprofit, and it was led by a man named Brian Gallagher. Brian Gallagher was made a, a trustee by Mike Pence. Mike Pence was Trump's vice president. So, but I want to tell you a little bit more about Brian Gallagher because, well, it's just one thing after another. So, Brian Gallagher worked for the United Way for 21 years, and 5 of those years was in Columbus, Ohio. Ohio, ding, 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 Leslie Wexner, all of the all of the companies that work for intelligence are all there, like Google and Facebook, and a lot of companies are in Ohio, Columbus, with Leslie Wexner. So he was appointed as the president and CEO of United Way in 2002. And in 2017, he was appointed, as I said, by then governor of Indiana, Mike Pence, as a trustee of the Ball State University for, until 2020. So in March 2021, Gallagher resigns from the United Way. But why? Because there were sexual harassment allegations. All right. 3 female employees had filed complaints alleging misconduct and retaliation against Gallagher and 2 other men at the United Way. Let me just see if I can find that article. I know I pulled it up, but what ended up happening was they did exactly what Leon Black has done. They hired an inside law firm and they investigated themselves and they found that, oh, well, gee, we haven't done anything wrong. No, we just haven't done anything wrong. So, I mean, it's not funny, but it's funny because it's like, yeah, we hired someone, a company to investigate us to see if there was any wrongdoing, to see if there was really any sexual harassment. And guess what? We found nothing except that Gallagher resigned on March 1st of this year, 2021, because of the sexual harassment allegations filed by, again, 3 employees. It was reported in the Huffington Post. Um, and the law firm concluded that the handling of the complaints was appropriate and that the dismissals were based on legitimate, non discriminatory, and non retaliatory reasons. Yeah, sure, sure. And then Gallagher said something about, oh, well, I planned to leave anyway, and I was going to transition into another company, but I decided now that I have been cleared of all wrongdoing, I'm just gonna step down now. So what is it about these people? So before I move on, I want to say that a couple of years ago, um, one of Bill Gates' employees who worked in his house got busted with, I think, 5 or 6 thousand images of child pornography on his computers. He got busted, and when the feds went to his house, this guy, and I don't have my notes in front of me, but I have everything on Twitter, so you just have to, search through my Twitter. Um, he happened to be at Bill Gates' house, so he was one of Bill Gates' um, inner circle guys. He's an engineer, and he was allowed access to Bill Gates' private home. Um, but they busted this guy. And what happened? I mean, the charges were like minimized. So instead of going to jail for a very long time, well, because, he's a Bill Gates close guy, and after all, Bill Gates is friendly with so many pedophiles. I mean, he was friendly with Jeffrey Epstein, pedophile, friendly with Prince Andrew, alleged pedophile, friendly with this guy, definite pedophile because he was busted. And how many other people does Bill Gates know who are pedophiles? Oh, Ghislaine Maxwell, alleged pedophile. Well, the list goes on and on. So after a while, as we have seen with Prince Andrew, if you're friendly with too many pedophiles, well, what does that make you? You know, there's a saying, tell me who your friends are, and I will tell you who you are. Um, so the information about Bill Gates has been coming out slowly, and not a lot of people have been paying attention again because Gates was not being talked about as much, and but now he is because of the divorce. So, what is another thing that Bill Gates was known for, but no one really talked about it? Well, before he married Melinda, Bill Gates used to like to party naked in his swimming pool in San Francisco with a bunch of call girls. Yes, they would have these big parties, and Gates, who looked so prim and proper, right? Because he always looked like a Boy Scout, he would be in the swimming pool naked, having fun with all of these women that they would pay to come over and service these, him and his friends. He was also somebody who went to clubs. And so he would wait until the club was empty, and then he would get up on a table and dance away. I mean, there's an actual article that talks about Bill Gates, before he married Melinda, standing up on a table after the club cleared a little bit and dancing on top of this table and sort of, with, I guess, his dorky moves, I guess not too dissimilar to how Virginia Giuffre has described Prince Andrew dancing at the club Tramps. These guys, they're not who they appear to be. They have a dark side. I know that during the years that I was with my abuser and I would go to San Francisco. And there were many times that my abuser went to San Francisco by himself. Why was he going to San Francisco? At the time, I thought it was just to talk to Bill Gates and to talk to the Apple guy, whose name I don't know why it escapes me, but it does because I have not had my coffee yet, and I'm going to have that as soon as I finish this. So he used to go and talk to Bill Gates, and he used to go talk to the head of Apple. Again, I don't know why I can't remember his name. And I thought at the time, because I didn't ask him, he would just drag me around to Washington, D.C., San Francisco, North Carolina, different places. I would just, have to just pick up at the drop of a hat and accompany this man to all of these trips at the time. And it was in the late 1980s to the early 1990s where he would go and again meet with these guys, and I thought it was because of investment purposes. Oh, he's going to go see how well Microsoft is doing, or he's going to go see how well Apple is doing, and based on what, and maybe he's going to buy stock. And of course, I didn't really know much about insider trading, and it did strike me as a little bit unusual. Why are all these trips to San Francisco? Do you have to talk to the head of Microsoft and the head of Apple, and why do you have to do this so often? Well, because we have sort of come to the point where most people now are beginning to be aware of the name Meshulam Rickless, who is connected to Leslie Wexner, who is connected to Leon Black, who is connected to Robert Maxwell, who is connected to John F. Kennedy, and who is connected to Joe Biden. And it just goes on and on. And I've told you that this is a multi-generational issue. That what the Jeffrey Epstein case has shown us is that this is a multi-generational problem. It didn't begin with Jeffrey Epstein. He was a straw man for one or more intelligence agencies, and it hasn't stopped. So that it continues. My point being that maybe there was something else that my abuser was discussing with these guys, because there were just too many trips to San Francisco and Washington, and it was just okay, something is off here, and all of these guys turn out to be now exposed as having a double life. So if you have a double life, like Bill Gates, everyone discovered when the announcement of his divorce was made was that one of the conditions that he had Melinda sign on to is that he would be allowed to spend a weekend every year with his ex-girlfriend. Now, what's interesting about these powerful men, and I'm going to call them powerful predators, okay? These powerful predators is that they will have their wives agree to an arrangement like this. So like my abuser had an arrangement with his wife, and it's actually written in the contract. They get married and they have like, even if they didn't have a prenuptial agreement, they do have a written contract about behavior and what they can do. And then during the course of their marriage, if there's an argument, a lawyer or two are brought in and they mediate the argument. And what happens is that the wife gets a certain amount of money to stay in the marriage so that they can continue to present themselves as a normal married couple. But she gets a certain amount of money and they agree, okay, well, I will no longer do this. I will no longer do this. So that when my abuser's wife discovered my existence, there was an arrangement made between the two of them. However, I also discovered, because for many years thereafter, until from 1993, when I managed to just leave that very abusive, very degrading situation, until recently, 2015, a former Department of State attorney, whose name I'm not going to mention right now, but he stayed in my life as the intermediary between myself and my abuser. And what he did for all those years was pretty much gaslight me, because I would say, hey, I'm being harassed, I'm being harassed, I'm being harassed. And he would say, well, no, he's not responsible for it. But you don't stay in somebody's life for so many years if nothing was happening. I mean, he was keeping tabs on me. And, but every now and then, he would let something slip. And one of the things he let slip early on was that my abuser and his wife had a relationship, some kind of arrangement where he was able to go once a year to, I think it was Amsterdam, where he was allowed to do whatever he wanted to do. But once he was back in the United States, he could not embarrass her. And as I think back, because it was a long time ago, my abuser may have told me that himself, but he had this thing. The problem is that if you're a sex addict and you're accustomed to buying sex, or you're accustomed to doing things out of the ordinary in that part of your life, you don't just leave it behind after, let's say, Bill Gates gets to see his ex-girlfriend for 3 days, or my former abuser gets to go to Amsterdam for a week. You come back to the United States and you're going to continue that pattern. And you're just not going to tell your wife, and she's not going to know, because you're surrounded by yes people. You're surrounded by people who are going to keep your secret. So anyway, There's a lot more information I want to share with you, but I'm already at the 30-minute mark. I don't want to make this very long. I will include my podcast about Melanie, Bill, and Prince Andrew, and I urge you to listen to that. I want to thank you for your amazing support. Um, so much has been happening, and it's because we are over the target, folks. And when you're over the target, they don't like it. They're very powerful people. They're accustomed to having their secrets kept secret under lock and key. And that's not happening anymore because there's so many of us. We're on to them. There's so many super sleuths now. So I want to thank you again for being amazing supporters, for your, like, it's almost 2 years now, and you guys have helped me stay on this case by buying my books, by becoming subscribers to my Epstein Project newsletter, by making a one-off contribution, or some of you have been contributing every month for almost 2 years, and I cannot thank you enough. Or you become a member of my Patreon, and I urge you, please continue to support people like myself who are doing this day in and day out, because, hey, you know what? Mainstream media, as you know, isn't going to do this. So, again, this is Kirby Sommers for the Epstein Project podcast. I wish you a good day, and I'm going to go have that coffee now. Alrighty, bye.